Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. This is week 2 of our Hawken muzzleloader build. This week we're gonna start sanding and filing the stock. Now last week I went over the general scope of the project, kind of everything that it entails, as well as what this project means to me personally. When I did that video I called this a Hawken rifle kit, and that's what it is, but I've done a little bit of research and learned that it might be more aptly called a Hawken style rifle kit. In the early 19th century, the Kentucky long rifle was the premier rifle at the time. Now the Hawken brothers got together and developed their own style of rifle that was shorter, had a larger bore, it was more accurate and more rugged than the Kentucky long rifle. It was more generally known as the Plains rifle, with the Hawken rifle being the name brand. All those reasons made the Plains rifle very popular among those involved in the fur trade up through most of the 19th century, until the advent of the breech-loaded firearms pretty much made muzzleloaders obsolete. So you didn't really hear much about muzzleloaders from the beginning of the 20th century up through the 1960s. Then, in the 1970s, the Thompson Center Arms Company made muzzleloaders popular once again with their replicas of several classic muzzleloader models, including the Hawken style. Now, Thompson Center Arms was not the only company to produce these replicas, but from what I can tell online, they are the best. So that just even adds more excitement onto this project. I'm already super excited about, super blessed to have the opportunity to complete that started with my dad over 40 years ago. All right, the first step in the process is to finish the buttstock section, which is this area over here. Now, you probably can't see this on the video, but the patch box and the buttstock have been factory sanded, and so the area between the brass and the walnut is perfectly flush. And the only way that I know you can really do that is you got to sand them both. You got to sand the wood until you're also sanding the brass here, and I can tell there's polishing lines on the brass. So that's how they did it, and that's how they got it perfectly flush. I mean, you can't even feel the transition, and your fingers can feel a 1 or 2 thousandth of an inch variation, and I'm not feeling that here. So this is perfectly smooth. So they did that at the factory, so that's what we have to go off of. Last time I mentioned I didn't know what this was for, but this is called a patch box, and it's a little trap door for you to keep your patches that I don't know how many it holds, but we'll find out later when we get them. So I bet that is handy dandy. The other thing that I noticed on here that you probably won't be able to see is how back heavy this thing is. The wood's pretty much even. There's a little bit more wood down here than up here probably, but there's so much more brass, I think, down here that's making the butt end much heavier. The center of gravity of this whole thing is about here. So every time I lift it up, it's kind of awkward. So I got to be really careful with that so that I don't drop it and have it fall on the floor and crack or something. Now, something that the instructions pointed out is that there are 3 factory-produced flat reference surfaces. There's one on both sides of the lock, and then one on top here. So we need to keep those in good shape for us to use as reference surfaces for clamping and whatnot. Okay, so if we look at figure 1 over here, we'll see that we're supposed to have the cheek plate, I think they call it, just off the side of the table. And we're gonna have this flat here on the table. We wouldn't want to put our clamp right on the stock, because that's gonna damage it or at least leave marks. So we put a piece of plywood in between here, just like the instructions recommend. That's a good idea. We could use those quick grips, which I like. They're faster, they're better, pretty much in every way. And as silly as it sounds, I'm going to use a C-clamp just because I'm really trying to stay true to the original, spirit of the project. So that's what they say that you're supposed to use. So that's what I'm going to use. So if we put it here, just so that the cheek plate is kind of up against the side here, we're going to put our piece of plywood on top. A little awkward. Make sure I'm referencing on a flat surface. I don't want to crack anything. That looks pretty good. Nice and slow. And we just want this to be firm so that when I'm sanding, it doesn't move on us. Then it falls on the floor and the project is over before we've even begun. Okay, we look like we're really in the middle of those flat reference surfaces. So, like I said, this section's already done, so there's really not a lot of work to do here, but nevertheless, we're going to be careful. It's kind of hard to see, but this area is real rough. It's kind of like one of those old 3D globes where you can feel the Rocky Mountains and stuff. So, I guess I'm going to start with our sanding block. I also have some loose sandpaper. You know, the thing about loose sandpaper is it's good to get into little curves, but if you have a bumpy surface and you work over with this, I think all you're going to do is you're going to maintain that same shape. You're just going to bring it down. Whereas if you use a sanding block, you will actually we'll start by clipping the peaks off the top of all those. So, all right, here we go. It's really important to have patience when you do work like this. It's so easy to get ahead of yourself and remove a lot of material with a tool like a file like this. There were a couple big high spots that I could tell the sandpaper I wasn't getting anywhere with, so I grabbed this file and I kind of really liked the way it was feeling, but I got to be careful not to remove too much material as I'm trying to work out some of these big gouges. So I'm not going to try and get this perfect right now, but what I am going to do is I have to work out these file marks I can see. You know, anytime that you go from a coarser grit to a finer grit, you got to make sure that you work out all of the marks left behind from the coarser grit, because as you move to even finer grit, you'll never work out those marks. So I can still see quite a few of those marks left over from this file. So I'm really going to make sure that those are worked out before I go on to the next section. Okay, I guess that's about it right now for the buttstock section. I guess the next thing we're moving on to is the fore end section. Okay, so before working the fore end section, which is the next step, they want us to attach these escutcheon plates. All right, so our hole for the escutcheon plate has been spotted. And now we got to drill a 1/16 inch hole. Had a close call. The drill that I grabbed, I was this close to starting that hole. It just didn't look right, and I took a more careful look, and it was a 5/64 drill. So that could have been bad to drill an oversized hole for this tiny screw. So I grabbed another drill that was also in a different spot for a 1/16 inch drill. We're not sure, so I'm gonna mic it. I can't see the markings on there if there is one. And we're right at 0.65, so that's a 16th. You know, I'm not entirely sure how deep to go, so I'm pretty sure this is the screw. There's a few screws in the bag with the escutcheon plates. I don't know what that's all about, but I'm pretty sure that this little guy is the one that we're gonna use. So what I'll do is I'll chuck up the drill bit here as short as I can, and I'll take a marker, and I'm gonna hold the screw next to the drill bit, and I'm gonna spin it in reverse so that it doesn't bite into the marker. And I'm gonna hold the top of the drill up to the top of the screw, and I'm gonna put a mark on the drill bit where the tip of the screw is even. So now, when I go to drill my hole, I'll see that black mark spinning around, and it contrasts really well with the shiny metal on the drill bit the drill bit's made of. I'm just kind of holding it up. Okay, this looks reasonable. Now I couldn't put this in the drill press because this is not a flat surface. It looked flat, but I was holding it up on there and it was rocking. So I just got to do my best to try to drill this hole perpendicular. Okay, well that looks nice. But now we're supposed to take it off and put it away so we can start sanding. So I'll do that. Okay, so the next thing is working the comb and tang section, but it says we've got to put the tang and the barrel in place. So I don't know what the tang is. Okay, so here's our barrel, and here's our tang. Okay, so they want me to tap this back a little bit to make sure everything's seated back and then wrap some masking tape around here. So I'm not supposed to be filing this yet. I'm supposed to screw the spot and drill and screw the tang into the wood. All right, so now we flipped it over. We're gonna work the last, oh no, there's 2 sections left still. We're gonna work the toe and trigger section. So we have to attach the trigger plate to the inlet. Trigger plate. Okay, so we're almost done for today. The last thing we gotta do is attach the trigger plate, which apparently is this thing. All right, we're on to the last step of the night, which is the lock flats, which I think is both sides of the section over here where the hammer and all that stuff is. Maybe it's called the lock, I guess. So I need to remove the hammer from the lock. Okay, done. And it looks like I'm gonna put this on, secure from the other side, and then I'm gonna sand down both sides, and then that'll be it for the night. All right, so it's not perfect. I'm definitely gonna come back and redo some of the sections that I can tell I missed, or I just kind of give it a good once over because, man, let's see, looking at the time now, I've been working on this for about 5 hours. And, again, this is just the rough sanding. It's probably the hardest part, or like the most time consuming regarding the wood. Going up with the progressively finer sandpaper should be much quicker, but nevertheless, there's lots of bumps that I can see, especially when I'm able to take this off from being clamped and move it around and put it in the light. I can see shadows where there's little hills and valleys. So I'm definitely gonna have to come back and touch those up. So I think it's a really good stopping point though, because I'm running out of juice, and I'm definitely gonna want to, come at it fresh, so that I know I'm not taking any shortcuts that are going to cost me in the end. So just a quick review. We sanded both sides of the buttstock, and then we drilled the holes and installed the escutcheon plates. Then we took it off, sanded the fore end section. Then we hooked the tang onto the barrel, seated it down here, drilled the holes for the tang, screwed it in. Then we sanded the comb and tang section. Then we had to put the trigger plate in. Same thing, drilled the holes, installed it, worked the toe and trigger section, they call it. I learned this is called the toe. So they're talking about the toe and trigger section. They're talking about making this whole line nice and straight, but then also blending the lines from the toe and trigger section into both sides of the buttstock and the fore end. And then the last thing that we did is we put the lock plate on and sanded both sides of that section. There's nothing on this side of the stock, but the lock side, we installed the lock plate here and sanded it down so that the wood was flush with that. We did both sections, so it's pretty symmetrical. Again, I'm going to come back and make sure that it's as perfect as we can get it. And but I'm really happy with the progress we made. It did a lot of work, and I'm getting really excited. It's starting to take some shape. All right, well, have a good week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week, where we will probably finish the stock. We're gonna do the next finer grits of sandpaper until it's nice and smooth. All the lines will be perfectly blended. And then the next thing is to start draw filing the parts, which is the metal work. We're gonna be making some metal chips. There's a thing in here that says that it should take us only about 8 hours to file and polish one barrel. So hopefully it doesn't take that long, but I don't know why it won't, because that's what they're saying it's gonna take. So we might have to do that in a couple sections, but so that's what'll be up next. All right, thanks again, have a good week.